Dear God, where do I even start with this one? Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, as everyone watching will probably already know, is the third and final entry of the Marvel space opera series. Things aren't exactly going super well for the team, with each of the Guardians trying their best to put their pasts behind them. But soon, a threat emerges that threatens the life of one of their own, and the group has to embark on one final quest that will force them to face the music they've all been running from. The story is a relatively simple one, but it's the simplicity of it that kinda works. It allows us to spend more time with the characters without being too bogged down by standard blockbuster exposition. Yeah, I'm not going to bury the lead here. This is my favorite movie of the trilogy. I was absolutely floored by what the film accomplishes, and you cannot talk about it without talking about its director, James Gunn. Ah, James Gunn, the proverbial phoenix who rose from the ashes. This man was fired from Marvel, went and directed one of DC's best movies of the last decade, was then subsequently rehired by Marvel to close out his franchise, but not before becoming the new creative head of DC entirely. What a G. Not only did he deliver a satisfying conclusion for this trilogy, but he did it in a way that felt fresh, because we have now seen the Guardians in 3 of their own movies, 2 Avengers films, and a holiday special. Marvel as a whole has now explored the outer reaches of space in various projects, but Gunn just delivered the biggest mic drop to show everyone how it's done. It's hard to keep a series going without losing steam, but I personally feel that he's been getting better with each movie. Because while I enjoyed the first Guardians of the Galaxy, I always felt that it wasn't perfect. It served as a great introduction to this colorful cast of characters, but it always felt like there was a missing 15-minute chunk where we saw the Guardians interact and grow more. I'm not saying they felt underdeveloped, I just didn't get a sense that they were truly a family until the sequel. In fact, I think Guardians 2 improved on several aspects of the first film, especially with regards to Gunn's direction. Making the leap from low-budget movies to grand-scale blockbusters might have taken him some time, but he's officially stepped up his game and has solidified himself as one of the best comic book film directors of all time. I loved his Suicide Squad, and I loved Guardians Volume 3. I especially like the way he chooses to shoot his action scenes now. We saw a hint of it with that amazing Yondu and Rocket jailbreak in Guardians 2, but there's a fight in Guardians 3 that cranks that energy up by 100. I remember seeing that Harley Quinn sequence in Suicide Squad and thinking to myself, wow, Gunn has stepped up his action game. And here, he continues to top himself. You'll know the scene when it happens. Overall, I would say this film is the most violent of all 3 Guardians movies. There's one death in particular that might be the most gruesome death I've seen in a Marvel movie. It was awesome. The Guardians themselves all have moments to shine. Pratt delivers my favorite performance of Star-Lord that I've seen from him yet. Batista's Drax and Palm Clementieff's Mantis have always been one of my favorite duos of the MCU. They really shined in the holiday special, and they're just as great here. Nebula is a character who I thought was pretty underwhelming in the first film, but there's been a lot of work done to make me care about her. Actress Karen Gillan, the Russos, and Gunn have allowed this character to blossom into one of my favorite members of the Guardians. Her sister, Gamora, played by Zoe Saldana, is given the hard task of playing a version of the character who has not grown with the team. That hardened warrior we saw of her in the franchise's beginning is her mode throughout most of this story, and I give a huge credit to Gunn for being faced with the challenge of sort of reintroducing her to the group without it feeling like we're wasting time retreading old ground. And of course, Groot is always a fun addition, but the real heart and soul of this movie is Rocket. As indicated by the trailers, this film explores his origin to a disturbing degree. It definitely was darker than I initially expected, and while I know some might take issue with this, I think it was 100% earned. Because we've heard rumblings in the past about his backstory. To not fully commit to the atrocities would feel cheap. I was seriously expecting to hear "In the Arms of an Angel" during some of these flashbacks. It's that heavy. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is without a doubt the heaviest of the trilogy, and one of the darkest movies the MCU has made, period. It runs the full gambit of tones without feeling like a mess, which is incredibly hard to do. I quite enjoyed what Taika Waititi did with Thor Ragnarok, but there's just no director in the MCU who can balance humor and high-stakes tension as effectively as Gunn can. It's remarkable that you can tell a story as bleak as this one while still having jokes that are funny and don't feel out of place. There's less humor in this one than in previous movies, but the jokes that are here mostly work. There are 1 or 2 running gags that overstay their welcome, but it's a minor flaw that I have with every Guardians movie. A large part of what makes this film so dark is its villain, the High Evolutionary, played by Jacudi Iwuji. I used to think Justin Hammer was Marvel's most hateable bad guy. Good lord, was this guy downright evil. And I think that works perfectly well here. Now, don't get me wrong, I like it when an antagonist has complex layers and a relatable motivation. But I also love when a film just fully commits to making them as evil as they possibly can, just for evil's sake. He was miles ahead of Ronan, but I still like him a bit less than Ego. He is perfectly well suited as the series' final threat, and you spend a significant amount of time just hoping to see him get his comeuppance. This might sound insane, but I actually found the High Evolutionary more threatening than Kang, which is sad because the only reason they made Ant-Man 3 was to hype him up as Marvel's next big thing. Oof. Where Kang was just walking around giving long monologues about things he's supposedly done and will do, the High Evolutionary is a straight menace, and we are shown quite plainly the lengths he's willing to go to achieve his twisted goals. Director James Gunn brings true authorship to this film, and it's what the MCU has been sorely lacking post-Endgame. I've certainly enjoyed some of their recent projects. No Way Home was a tad messy, but still a great experience, and Black Panther 2 was a solid tribute to Chadwick Boseman's passing. But overall, I think we can all agree the quality of these Marvel things has been trending downwards lately. The last Marvel film I saw, Ant-Man Quantumania, perfectly epitomizes everything that's been wrong with the franchise. I know I was nice with my grade and gave it a C-, but it definitely isn't higher than D+. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is, without a doubt, my favorite film the MCU has made in the last two phases. I absolutely love when a studio just lets a director use their characters to tell the kind of story they want to tell. Within reason, that is. Because this is a movie that actually feels like a movie. So many of these things have just felt like extended previews for future content coming down the pipeline. From the opening 5 minutes, you can tell that this is a story that someone wanted to tell. There's no awful green screen or characters that feel awkwardly pasted in. The cinematography and camera work on display here is remarkable, and it stands head and shoulders above previous Marvel flicks. There's genuine emotion here, and it was honestly kind of jarring for me to get that in a Phase 5 entry. Heck, even the close-ups of some of these CGI creatures' eyes had me tearing up. When a film feels wholly unique without coming off as an assembly line-made product, that's the kind of comic book film that reminds me why I love the genre so much. When it comes to issues I have with the film, there are a few that stick out to me. Besides the few annoying running gags I already mentioned, the problems I had mainly dealt with the way certain characters were handled. The Guardians roster has been steadily increasing for years, and by this movie, they're practically a whole community. And while I did feel that most of the team got their due, the addition of Adam Warlock felt unnecessary. They hinted at his arrival in the post-credit scene of Guardians 2, but it's been a few years and he just gets lost in the shuffle here. Will Poulter delivers some cool moments as this iconic comic book character, but his personality comes off like an upgraded version of his character from We're the Millers. It fits the comedic tone here, but I would have been satisfied if he just wasn't included at all. You could have used that screen time to give me more of the Guardians themselves, particularly more of Rocket and Groot. They're a duo that I quite enjoyed watching in the previous installments. Here they're barely given any time together. It bothers me because this is the final entry of the series, and it deals heavily with Rocket's upbringing. I don't know, man. I just wish we could have gotten 1 or 2 more scenes with the pair. And that's about it when it comes to major problems I have with Guardians 3. I hate to jump the gun, but this has definitely made its way into my top 5 Marvel movies, and it has solidified these films as my favorite trilogy of the MCU. But despite me loving this film, I can't help but feel a certain bit of sadness. I chose to title this video, The Last Great Marvel Movie, and I'm not doing that to be a pessimist, I'm just saying there won't be any more entries in this franchise that will be handled with as much care as these ones were. I'm sure there will be some projects that will be fun in their own ways, but James Gunn was the best director this studio had, and with his exit, I can't help but feel that things will just go back to business as usual. I will certainly own up to it if a newer entry comes that ever reaches the height of this movie, but I can't foresee a creative head getting this much control over a future project. So in conclusion, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is a thrilling, emotional, dark, and bold finale to the trilogy. I've seen some mixed reception of it online, but all I can tell you is how I personally felt, and it immediately made me want to go back to the first film and watch the journey with these characters all over again. And by the way, if you're still doubting whether James Gunn can direct the next Superman movie, I, I just don't know what to tell you, man. I'm gonna give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 an A-.